Hey friends. Well, I just had my lesson with Madeline, and man, if it does not just keep being the most mind-blowing experience, then I don't know what to call it. It's so cool. I've done a lot of work these last 2 weeks on a piece, Chopin Etude number 3, which is one of his. It's an etude that has a kind of very wide range in terms of what the energy of the piece is. It starts out almost like a lullaby, and then has this beautiful transitional section, and then it goes into a full-on, just really pretty dissonant, just tritones against each other, and then big diminished patterns, leaps, and kind of a cadenza type thing, and then it comes back to the lullaby at the end. It's just a beautiful piece. My God. It's one of those pieces that I used to hear before I knew how to identify the piece. I would hear it, and I would not know that it was an etude, because it doesn't sound like it. Most of his etudes have a kind of specific character, or you can kind of hear what it's an etude for in the etude, even though they're beautiful pieces. But this one really kind of goes all over the place. And we were talking about a technique that I've been using that's really been helping, of singing the various parts, right? So, and I've noticed something, I've learned something in the last couple of weeks, which is, I'll be playing a difficult technical passage, and it will be difficult. There'll be some difficulty that I'm overcoming, whatever it is physically, that I feel like it's a challenge to play it as fast and as under control as it's asking to go. And Madeline last lesson was encouraging me to sing all the parts, sing all the different voices. And I was like, well, what does that even mean? On these giant diminished leaping chords, it means singing tritones that, like, bing bong bang bong bang bong bang bong, and like going down, and then it moves down by half step, and then it moves back up again, and then it moves back down, then it cascades in half steps. Tritones cascading in half steps. And I was like, singing that, how's singing that gonna help me? Well, I did it anyway. And lo and behold, I found that even if I sat down and played the passage and then only practiced singing the passage, I would still sometimes play the passage, but really slowly and no technical practice whatsoever, just playing the passage with my voice, singing one of the four voices. It's all 4-note chords if you count both hands. So I'm singing one part and playing the other three. Well, after doing that, it was always substantially, markedly easier. It was like tension had been released. I was somehow more able to navigate the passage. Speed increased, precision increased, ease of touch increased, just from singing. And then she talked about this neurologist who had spoken to her, who had kind of explained this for her, because she said there are 3 types of neurons. They're motor neurons that take signals from our brain to our muscles. There are sensory neurons, which are that connect our sense organs, our perceptions, to the brain. And then there's another kind of neuron, I don't forget what you called it, but it's like it's basically a bridge neuron that synchronizes those, or that communicates between those two. So the thing that blew my mind was hearing more. This is what she and this other woman kind of figured out. Hearing more clearly relaxes the nervous system. So, in other words, as I'm playing the passage and there are technical difficulties in it, my ears maybe aren't able to hear exactly what's going on. Well, I don't notice that that's causing friction, but it's causing friction. My not actually knowing what it is causing friction in my mind. When I sing a part, or I sing all of the parts, and my ears start to know what's happening, even though it's a really kind of dissonant and weird, kind of out there passage, my ears now can follow all these parts, and that relaxes my nervous system. So now there's less tension in my hands when I go to play it. And I was like, what? Like that, because that was exactly my experience. My experience was, I just sang all these parts, and for some reason it's substantially easier to play them with my hands. I have no idea why. I haven't actually done any work with my hands to make them easier to play. You'd think that moving your hands around a keyboard, it's just a matter of like distance and geometry. What is hearing? How does hearing have such an outsized, kind of pronounced effect on our ability to do something physical? Well, here's why. Because there's actually something like stopped, something, it's like friction. It's like there's friction in the system when my ears aren't actually understanding, and there's no bridge between those two things. It's like my ear, like I'm doing something physical, but I don't actually know, my sense perception isn't connected to the physical thing. So there's friction there that I'm not even aware of until this is something that we can become aware of, but it's something that I wasn't aware of in that way until, these last couple of weeks, and then today kind of like coalesced into an actual insight. But I was like, oh my God. So then that just opens like a whole other category of possibilities if we understand that that's, that relationship between sound and motor neurons, like sensory neurons and motor neurons on piano, that's happening constantly. So like, that's why when we don't understand something, or when something is opaque to us, there's more stress in our system. I mean, literally the feeling of having a technical difficulty at the piano is a feeling of stress. It's a feeling of there's something stressful here. And I don't know what it is. It's hard to identify what's so stressful, but there's some kind of stress going on. And then singing it relieves that stress. Well, that's kind of like what meditation is doing. Meditation is taking a moment, and the thoughts that are all here, they start to get seen, and impulses get acknowledged, and things that I'm either wrestling with or somehow trying to deal with go from being just kind of like background stress to being foreground stress, which is why we avoid meditation, by the way. It's because all that background stress that we all know is there. Who wants to take all that and go, let me look that in the eye, right? That's what meditation's doing. But the key, of course, is then it gets seen. And that thing that's happening, like the sound of the notes that was happening kind of subconsciously and creating this subconscious substrate of not understanding really what's going on, comes into the foreground, and we look at it. Now we can identify all these different things that we're stressed about, all the little, and that's, again, that's why it's like meditation can be intense. But we take that and then sit with it. That's also why, probably, interestingly, I avoided singing these parts for a while. It's the kind of thing that Madeline would tell me to do. And I'd be like, I know this is a good idea. And then I may do a little bit of it, but I didn't really do that much of it until these last couple weeks where I was like, okay, there was something about this piece that just kind of had me stumped. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to do what she says. And I avoided singing those parts for the same reason that I might avoid meditation, because it's like, singing one part out of a 4 or 5 or 6 part counterpoint illuminates the scarcity of my understanding. It shows me how much I'm doing with my hand automatically without really knowing what each of those parts is doing. And singing those parts is almost stressful because you're like, oh God, now I have to actually hear each one of those voices. That's so much material, and so I resisted it, and I'm noticing now, oh wow, it's the same as meditation. Go for it. Like, it's so that the mileage that we gain, the mileage that we can log by leaning into that discomfort, and by simply kind of admitting what we don't know, by letting ourselves be a little overwhelmed by that, by how kind of like elementary our understanding is, and little by little hooking in, because it really did get to where then I could play the etude, especially the slow section, and hear the accompaniment part. I could hear what's going on. I could hear when I missed a note in the accompaniment. I could hear when the accompaniment notes popped out a little too much. It popped out of the texture a little too much. And like, it was almost like magic. It was like, oh wow, I can actually hear it now. I mean, you'd think it would be fundamental, but because that we can get so technical, it's not. It's something that we still have to kind of remind ourselves to do, to come back to that listening side of things. So anyway, it cracked a whole bunch of stuff open today for me to understand what's really happening when I do that singing. I mean, I'd already kind of learned, like, okay, anytime I have a technical problem and I think it's an issue of my hand position or whatever, or just an issue of my hands not quite knowing how to navigate the passage, forget my hands. Sing the passage. Sing all the parts, and then see how it feels. And it was really cool to kind of connect that up with a kind of understanding of the neurology, and then to extrapolate that to something like meditation, something that's kind of where our entire life is part of what we're investigating, and what we're trying to take from background noise to foreground, so that clarity can happen, and with clarity it can settle and it can stop being stressful. So anyway, very cool instruction, a very cool insight to come across. So that's what I got today, people. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.